thank you very much for joining us here for a very special conversation on gender parity and the need for gender parity to try and foster the cause of economic recovery. My name is Shireen Bhan, and it gives me great privilege and pleasure to welcome here on this panel a very special set of guests who are going to be talking to us about this very important conversation that we hope to mainstream. I am also going to make this interactive, so it would be nice if you do have questions and comments. I will get to you towards the end of our panel discussion, and we will engage with all of you as participants as well. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to our panelists here today. Let me start from my left. Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning at Nigeria, Zainab Ahmed, thank you very much for joining us. Smriti Irani, the Minister of Women and Child Development representing India. Ms. Irani, thank you very much for joining us. Ilan Goldfajn, the President, Inter-American Development Bank in Washington, D.C., the lone man on the panel. Thank you very much for joining us here as well. And Gabriela Bucher, the Executive Director at Oxfam International, Kenya. Thank you very much, Gabriela, for joining us. I also want to make a note of the fact that CNBC TV 18, of course, we are India's leading news brand. We have started a campaign called the Future Female Forward Initiative. It is a women's collective. We launched this in November, and we hope to mainstream this conversation, not just in India, but take it global, and that is why we're here having this conversation. Now, I want to understand from you specifically, when we talk about social protection, when we talk about fiscal choices and fiscal space, and it is getting constrained, as Gabriela pointed out, the debt burden increasing at this point in time. We're in an era of higher interest rates and high inflation as well. How do you, as a leader, as a policy maker, make those choices? What are those choices going to be as you move forward?
Well, it's indeed very difficult times. The world has been going through a number of crises, whether it's COVID or climate, several things that we have to cope with on a daily basis. It means we have to do more. We have to find how to do more with less, because the fiscal space is indeed very, very constrained. A lot of our resources is going towards debt service. So for every naira we spend, we try to see how do we get the most benefit from it. And that's one of the reasons why we had to take the decision to say, how does it affect women? Because not only because they're half of the population, but because they are further behind than the rest of the population, and also because they tend to, when you give a small business, a woman small business money, they tend to manage it better, and therefore more results, more outcomes. And we need to do this on a consistent basis, and we need to do this according to a plan. So we did a medium-term national development plan that across all of the sectors in the plan, we had the gender lens. And we costed the plan to require $775 billion US. 15% of that plan is contribution is from the government. So we need to now also find how we can support private businesses, both large, small, as medium, as well as small enterprises, to contribute more to the economy. We need to also look at how do we create partnerships between the public and the private sector to enable the private sector channel its resources that is required to fund the development plan in the best possible way. While they get returns, we also get the contribution to the growth that is so that is very important to need. And in all of this, there has to be a systematic system of monitoring of what are the outcomes of these targets that we have set. We have supported our National Bureau of Statistics that for every category of data that they produce, they must make sure that the data is also disaggregated, especially for social reporting, like on poverty index, on jobs, that the data is disaggregated. So we see whether we're on the right track or we need to continuously remodel. In the financial services also, we have seen data that shows that women are further behind in terms of financial inclusion. So there's a conscious effort also within the financial services using digital ID to bring as many women, unlike India, we have a lot of population that are still not banked. They're not in the banking system, and the largest proportion of those are women. So when you bring women into the banking system, you're able to give them financing through the banking system more seamlessly. And if government has interventions to provide, you're able to do that because there are bank accounts and identity numbers that you're able to channel those support. So the policy has to be deliberate and it has to be consistent, whether it is a private sector company, whether it is a public sector company, or even whether it is the financial services and other services. We need to start also at the ground level in engaging youths. Well, by the way, we don't have the problem we have. We have like 60% of our 206 million people are youths, and very active youths, very vibrant. So in engaging youths, we have to begin to make that provision to say a certain percentage of the youth we employ, whether we're government or business, should be girls, so that they are there from the beginning, they go through the system, and then they have a chance to grow to the top.
Well, you ended on an aspect which is controversial, an aspect that I think evokes a fair amount of discussion and debate on whether there should be reservation for women in different sectors. Should it be at the board level? Should it be at the entry level? And I think, many companies and countries are grappling with this issue. But you talked about collaboration with the private sector, and I want to move that forward, Minister Irani, to talk about global collaboration as well. This is a universal problem. It's a universal challenge. It is not Nigeria's problem or India's problem. You need to customize and design solutions that are relevant for each country or each company, but this is a universal challenge. In the context of that, I want to address with you, India takes on the G20 presidency. One of the issues that has been prioritized for global collaboration by India as part of the G20 agenda is women-led development. So what can we expect on that front?
I think, Shireen, we have to recognize that the vocabulary of gender justice is undergoing a change without much reflection. On this panel today, we spoke about women from the context of the labor market. Not many of us prioritize women as entrepreneurial leaders, as though we as a gender are to feed just the labor market. So when we talk about the vocabulary of gender justice, we spoke today in this House about emancipation of women. And I'm very proud that the Prime Minister changed that narrative, and we saw a tectonic shift where we now say women-led development, which means that for any nation to prosper, women have to be the helm of economic affairs. We have a female finance minister. That being said, I want to just elaborate on one or two challenges. We need to recognize that we will not have a one-size-fits-all solution. We have differentiated national potentials. We have differentiated national responsibilities and national challenges. Now, people say that technology is a great leveler and enabler for all genders. But what is the language of technology today available for women? I will not speak from any other experience but the Indian experience. We are looking at an age of automation. The language of automation is English. India has 16,000 dialects, 125 languages which are constitutionally recognized. If you want to empower the agency of women technologically, do we have that technology in my native languages? That is one issue that needs to be addressed. It is not only a solution that we are seeking for gender justice, I think it has great financial potential for companies. The second issue is that when you talk about the presidency and India at the helm of that affair, we also look at the digital transformation. Gabriela spoke about the red flagging of health spend. Now let's take another Indian example, which is the Ayushman Bharat program, which is the world's most, I think, elaborate, ambitious health program. We put money behind ensuring that for 1,300 diseases, which includes cardiovascular issues and many other challenges that emanate from the health systems, 26,000 hospitals across the country are impaneled, servicing 100 million families, which means at least 100 million women, where they can seek access free of cost for 1,300 diseases. Now, what is the impact? Societally and culturally, it was presumed that issues like breast cancer and cervical cancer are not largely spoken of, given the cultural context of closed societies. That is the presumption one had. Now, if you look at just one component of the success of the Ayushman Bharat program, the health program, we have in the past 2 years seen 130 million Indian women get themselves scanned for cervical cancer and breast cancer and receive treatment if they deemed it medically fit, free of cost. Governance and democracy has delivered on the health aspect, at least in India. So what is the agency that we bring to the G20 presidency? That when you talk about digital transformation, it need not be limited again to fiscal engagements, to building of corporations, to building of enterprise. It can have a cumulative effect across various segments. Academics. We had a stagnant education policy for 3 decades. We brought about a new education policy. Did we do it only in the halls of power in New Delhi? No, we did not. The Prime Minister ensured that we have over 260,000 village education councils. All the councils were called upon. Universities and college systems and parent-teacher associations across all districts of India were asked, what is the kind of academic support you seek for your children? The Parents' Alliance, the Alliance of Young Students were all called upon. Then a policy was arrived upon. And one of the benefits of that collaboration between government and citizens is that for the first time, India now has a gender inclusion fund in our education policy to help build academic infrastructure, particularly aimed at young girls and women. So the other issue which we hope through W20 to also leverage is the desire to ensure that we transition from innovation, especially in the gender space, to enterprise. Because a lot is left to be done in that segment. Today, 42% of STEM graduates in India are women. How do I encourage them that innovate for enterprise? And I think if that becomes a global call for action, much change can happen. Because do we reduce women only to consumption of technology, or do we want to support them to become leaders of technological institutions or technological enterprise? So I think that the G20 gives us a unique opportunity to speak about our experiences, speak about our commitment, but also say to the G20 coalition that we hope that this expression of experience somewhere percolates to the global south, to empower the global south, because we as a part of the presidency are saying that this is not about the Indian future. This is about global future and gender justice for all women across all geographies.
Absolutely, and I think that is the perfect opportunity for us to get comments in from our participants here, because it is going to require, as I pointed out, dialogue at different levels, dialogue within countries, within companies, and within the international alliance as well. So, yes, ma'am, you have a question. I'm going to get a microphone across to you. Please go ahead.
So thanks again for this opportunity. I'm Luana Genot from Brazil. I work with inclusion in the labor market. I'll be brief. In Brazil and Latin America, we are more than 210 million Black and Indigenous women and from marginalized groups. And I just would like to get to know from different reality standpoints, how do you ensure like intersectionality in policy making and addressing marginalized groups' needs? I mean, especially from non-dominant groups, like from low castes or, low ethnicities, or, especially in Brazil, Black and Indigenous women, for example. It can be obviously from disaggregated data standpoint, but also from a tech standpoint. But I just would like to know, how do you do affirmative actions in different realities? Thank you.
Would you like to take that?
Thank you, and a very good question, and something that I was beyond the intersectionality that you're talking about in terms of different ethnic backgrounds. We also need to speak about different gender identities, queer, non-binary, all the different identities that people have. We've been speaking very much in a binary way, and that's part of our challenge going forward. Is great, as you say, and it's something for us to work on together on how policies can really address the intersecting identities. And we know already we're starting from 178 countries that have laws that restrict full participation of women, let alone all these different gender identities that need to be central. So policies that are centered on what the different groups would require specifically. So it would be depending on context, and difficult to say a global response, but to say that it should be central to any policy work.
Thank you. My name is Paula Escobar. I'm a Chilean journalist. And I wanted to ask you about quotas. Because in Chile, we had a very interesting debate about gender parity regarding the new constitutional process. So it was accepted to have gender parity in the organ that is going to write the new constitution. The first project was rejected, but now we are going to a new one. And gender parity is one of the few things that is going to be, again, part of the project. So it's going to be written 50% women, 50% men. But that is about political participation. Now the government wants to pass a law on 40% quota in corporations. So there's debate, you know. Business people, they don't like to have this kind of affirmative action by law. So there's debate about that. So I wanted to know, what do you think about quotas, specifically in corporations? Thank you.
Mr. Goldfajn, would you like to take that? And as I said, this is a controversial issue, and I think every country is grappling with it. In India, we now have made it mandatory for women to have representation on boards, but there is a larger debate on how much and what more needs to happen, if at all, you go down the reservation road or the affirmative action road. Your thoughts?
Well, there are different, I would say, political realities, and I think each country has an heterogeneous way of dealing with it. In terms of the regional banks, what we have been doing is having indicators and targets for gender, and I realized that there are different identities that should be incorporated in that regard. There's this issue about transversality of gender versus development, but I think we have to have the three of them: gender, development, and ethnicity, and other things. We need to put them together. I think the world is getting more complex. But for now, how the regional bank has been doing is looking at the targets, has something to achieve for the loans you give, for the projects we do, for everything we do. But we don't have, we don't promote the regulations for the country. The countries do the regulations by themselves.
Minister, let me end by asking each one of you, and exactly, I think we've got 30 seconds for each of you. You've previously said that women must have a seat at the table and they must be co-creators of any strategic intervention. And to the point that was made here by the lady, how do we get more women to get a seat at the table?
It's actually what she said is engaging more men, finding more he for she's is what we call it. Last year, we tried to amend our constitution to be able to have a commitment of 30% elected positions for women. And we failed despite all of the campaigning, because the men were asking, okay, if we give you the 30%, what about the 70%? Are you going to be also a part of that? And it didn't go through. So it's really very important to get, and there are some men that are very sympathetic, to get more men on our side, because that's the only way you can make progress.
Absolutely. Minister Irani.
Well, I think that I can very happily today elaborate on how, if men are at the helm of this partnership, things change. Nobody expected Prime Minister Modi to speak about building of toilets. He did, and he got it done. He's the first Prime Minister, irrespective of his gender, let me say this, who gave India its first menstrual hygiene administrative protocol. He is the first Prime Minister in India who passed in both Houses of Parliament medical termination of pregnancy at 24 weeks for women without a whimper or a noise from any other man in Indian politics. He is the first man, or woman for that matter, who stood on Independence Day just, I think, 2 years ago and spoke about access to menstrual hygiene products by girls and women in our administrative systems for ₹1. He said, go get it. The fact that a man at the helm of affairs has brought about a change not only in discourse, but also in administrative capacity, ensured that gender justice percolates, I think is a very fine example to reiterate what she says. The lady says, yes, we need that partnership. What is significant is that we talk about gender parity today in a room which has a smattering of gentlemen.
Yes,
We need more rooms like this. We need more conversation,
men.
and we need equal participation.
I absolutely agree. I'm going to give Mr. Goldfajn the final say, but Gabriela, very quickly, 20 seconds, we're out of time. How do we get more women at the seat of the table? And of course, how do we engage and partner more with men?
So I think we need to go back to the subject matter of the panel, so economic recovery, and I think it is about, we're saying it's a holistic rethinking, and we're not wanting to recover to where we were before. We want to really transform a system where we're all at the table, in meaning that we are valuing all our identities and understanding that together we make societies that thrive, but both because it's a right, but also because it makes economic sense. And the care economy being at the center, and I'm happy that the WEF is creating a council for the care economy, and we are participating on it, and it's working across sectors that we transform.
Mr. Goldfajn, the final 10 seconds to you.
I just want to say that we are already engaging with positive masculinity here with me.
Well, we have an example of that right here on the panel. Ministers, Gabriela and Mr. Goldfajn, thank you so much for joining us here. It has been an interesting conversation with many ideas and insights on the table on what we can do to take this cause forward, what we can do to champion the case for more women to participate in the global economy. And of course, as we've all pointed out, there is no one-size-fits-all solution. It will need to be customized, but there needs to be a greater degree of collaboration. On your screens, ladies and gentlemen, that is the final slide that we are going to show you. That is what is happening at the World Economic Forum, the many initiatives of the forum to try and see that we can bridge this gap, we can mind the gap. That's, of course, the Global Gender Gap Report. I know Ms. Irani has issues with that, but that's a debate for another day. We've got the Gender Parity Accelerators and the Global Parity Alliance. So, you know, the QR codes are there. If you want to find out more about any of these initiatives, go ahead and do so. Do send us your feedback and your comments, your suggestions. We would love to hear from you. Once again, many, many thanks to my panel and many thanks to the participants. You've been a wonderful audience. Thank you very much for joining us here this morning.